Breaking news at the moment, DGCA panel has submitted its report on IndiGo to MOCA, which is the Ministry of Civil Aviation. The committee was formed on 5th of December and the committee was granted extension till today to submit its report. The Civil Aviation Regulator, NDTV, had reported that had extended the deadline for a 4-member committee to submit its report on the massive disruptions of IndiGo's flight operations a couple of days ago. Danish Anand, the reporter, our colleague who has been on top of this story, joins us to give us more details. Danish, what are your sources exactly telling you on this?
This is a big development in the overall IndiGo matter, as the special 4-member committee, which was appointed by the DGCA on the 5th of December, they have submitted their comprehensive report to the DGCA. Top sources are telling us that right now, the report is completely confidential, so we have no idea right now that what is the cause that the committee has found, that why such massive flight cancellations happened over the past month, and then we saw the same impact happening in the first few days of December as well. So this committee was completely tasked to find out that what exactly led to such events, and whether IndiGo was prepared for FDTL or not. If it was, then why did such flight cancellations happen at the first place? Moreover, the committee was also tasked to find out that how exactly did IndiGo did rostering for the winter schedule. Plus, the committee was also tasked to find out that what is IndiGo's roadmap to hire more pilots and to increase its frequency and to ensure that such an event is not repeated again. But let me tell you that while this is one report that has been found out by the government itself, but besides that, IndiGo also sometime back announced that they have hired an external investigator to find out and to conduct a proper root cause analysis into the entire matter. But although if we see the top sources, the government sources have told NDTV Profit that the committee indeed has submitted its report. It is confidential at the moment, but in some more time we'll come to know that what exactly has been the top points in the report. But completely breaking right now is the fact that the committee has submitted its report to the Ministry of Civil Aviation, and we'll come to know that what exactly has gone wrong with IndiGo.
Exactly. So, as you said, the main job of this panel was to find out the core cause of the flight disruptions that had brought the civil aviation, ecosystem to a standstill when IndiGo was going through that whole lot of cancellation crisis. And just for the benefit of our viewers, Danish, can we revisit when exactly did this crisis begin? I remember December 2nd was the day when initial delays came to the forefront of it and started really hampering customers, passengers. Take us through that timeline if possible, please.
That's correct. At the beginning of this month, the Ministry of Civil Aviation came out with a small report in which it said that in the month of November, IndiGo had cancelled over 1,200 flights. And like you rightly said, that on 2nd of December, we saw the initial flight cancellations happening. But between 3rd to 5th December, this was a very massive issue in which we saw thousands of flights getting cancelled. And 3rd, 4th and 5th were really badly affected days across the country. And it led to several passengers suffering through flight delays and cancellations. But if we look at the other few days, and in the next few days, we saw that IndiGo started recalibrating its network. It had cancelled flights at the Delhi airport for one entire day to recalibrate the entire operations. And then after that, we saw that slowly IndiGo started to increase its flights, started to reduce its total number of cancellations. And as we approached somewhere in mid-December, we saw tight scrutiny from the government, from the regulator, as well as from the CCI happening over the past few weeks. Everyone is seeking answer to understand that what really led to such massive flight cancellations. And IndiGo in the past, initially on the 2nd and or 3rd of December, it had said that due to various reasons, which included adverse weather conditions, certain software glitches, their flights were getting cancelled. But later on, we came to know that IndiGo was not prepared to adapt itself to the flight duty time limitations, because if we look at the other airlines, everyone was able to adapt to those FDTL norms, but IndiGo, which is the largest carrier in the country right now, it suffered through certain flight cancellations, and even right now we are seeing that the airline is operating with 10% reduced flights, and this mandate was given by the DGCA. And very lastly, I would like to tell you that the relaxation in FDTL norms for IndiGo by the DGCA has been granted only till the 10th of February 2026.
Exactly, and understanding the FDTL norm is very, very important because this was at the epicenter of the crisis. And see, according to the airline, it had difficulties with roster planning in the wake of the government's crew safety regulations. And IndiGo, in response, had also told that it is going to work on that, and it assured its customers that operations would be back to normal by the 1st of February. Do we have any update on that FTDL angle, as far as IndiGo is concerned, Danish?
IndiGo has ample a few weeks in order to prepare for the flight duty time limitation norms. And in fact, as we reported earlier this week, that IndiGo has fast-tracked its command upgrade. And by that, I mean the process of, upgrading the pilots from first captains to captains is being processed very fastly. So if this happens well in time, then IndiGo will have the adequate number of pilots to operate the number of flights as per the FDTL norms. Because if you look at these FDTL norms, they have given more relaxation to the pilots, and there is an 8 hours increase rest period, due to which we saw that the entire roster of the airline, it somehow suffered because of this 8-hour gap. Because if you look at the normal routine of a pilot, they are on the shift is of somewhere between 10 to 12 hours, which includes the flying hours as well as their duty hours. But when it comes to flying, they are allowed to fly for only 7 to 8 hours in a day, and they cannot exceed that. So that is why, in order to ensure that the pilots, they don't suffer through the fatigue, and the safety of the aircraft and the entire operations is well maintained. So that is why these norms had come out. And in fact, this was the second phase of FDTL implementation, which the industry was asked by the government to do. And over the past few months, just before these phase 2 was rolled out, we saw the government doing back-to-back sessions with the industry to really find out whether there have been some issues with the FDTL compliance or not. And sources, in fact, the government has also said that in the past meetings, IndiGo had never highlighted that they would be suffering because of the FDTL norms. And towards the end of November and the beginning of December, we saw that how the airline was unable to adapt to the new FDTL norms. And later on, we saw recent certain messages from the CEO telling everyone that the operations are getting back to normal.
Right. Thanks so much, Danish, for helping us take the first layer of that news. Because remember, viewers, it's a very important news that's just been broken. The DGCA panel, formulated by the DGCA itself, it's a 4-member panel, and that submitted the report on IndiGo to the Ministry of Civil Aviation. Although the details of what's been submitted and what does the report entail is confidential as per our sources, but as and when it comes out, we will definitely give you an update on that. And remember, the 4-member panel comprised of the joint DG, DGCA, Deputy DG, DGCA, SFOI, and Flight Operations Instructor. So, of course, this is extremely important, but remember, the fact that the 4-member committee has submitted its report to the Ministry of Civil Aviation is an important development, because this brings sort of in some way or the other brings the crisis to its closing point. When it began on December 2nd with initial delays, and then went on to mounting up in thousands of flight cancellations pan-India. There were many headlines made out of this crisis. Of course, we had experts also we spoke to on the channel, and many people had their point of view as well. And the core of the crisis was found in the FDTL norms. IndiGo basically couldn't plan its roster well as per the new norms that basically gave more resting time to pilots. And FDTL is basically flight duty time limit norms, and that basically controls or surveils or regulates the amount of time that is allowed by the government for pilots to fly in a week. NDTV had also reported a couple of days ago that the Civil Aviation Regulator DGCA had extended the deadline for the 4-member committee to submit its reports on the massive disruptions of IndiGo's flight operations. And the panel, headed by Joint Director General Sanjay K. Brahmani was initially scheduled to submit its findings within 15 days. That was by December 20th. But today, December 26th, our sources have told us that the 4-member panel has submitted its report to MOCA, which is the Ministry of Civil Aviation. The airline initially had sought 15 days to respond to the notice, and the panel has already taken the statements of IndiGo Chief Executive Officer Peter Elbers and Chief Operating Officer as well. And this, of course, comes after IndiGo faced major operational crisis earlier this month with massive flight cancellations, as I said earlier, mainly due to lack of planning in implementing the new flight duty norms for pilots. In fact, as my colleague Danish also mentioned, and in fact we have Sanjay Lazar, aviation expert, joining us at this given point in time. Thank you so much, Mr. Lazar, for joining us at this given hour. We are currently trying to make sense of this breaking news. What, according to you, does this mean for IndiGo? The report has finally been submitted to the Civil Aviation Ministry.
Good evening, Malika. Thank you for having me on. It will depend on the deeper details of the report that have been submitted, because as we know, it has caused immense chaos across the country. We now also are aware of certain facts that were not known to us much earlier, that, IndiGo had constantly been letting pilots go, and there was no recruitment from the middle of this year. So I think there'll be a lot of, magnifying glass on the way IndiGo operated. But I'd also like to see a deeper, look into how the DGCA functioned. It'll be interesting what the report contains, and whether, because 2 of the people who approved those schedules are part of that committee. So whether they're going to lay the blame on themselves or pass it on to others will be very interesting. Let's wait and see. Let the minister disclose the details of the report once, it's presented to the committee, etc., in Parliament, and probably get known to us in a day or 2.
Right. And Mr. Lazar, even though the OTP, which is on-time performance of the flight of the airline, has gone back to normal, I'd like to understand from you, what exactly does the crisis mean for IndiGo? And do you think it will be able to recover by February as the airline promises?
Well, let's be very clear. Despite this, fiasco that we've witnessed, IndiGo is a very sound, solid airline. It's, the largest operator in India, and of course they were expected to get back to their OTP. They've got 2 major exemptions from the government and from the DGCA on the night landings, as well as the definition of the night for the pilots for FDTL purposes. So obviously they managed to bring things into perspective. Whether they will be able to manage post-February will also depend on how many pilots they bring in. I think they put out ads, they started recruiting, and I expect them to bring in some, foreign pilots as well, and as well as expedite their command training. So I think they may be able to manage. Let's see. They'll also probably shrink, a little bit of their network. But I think, this calls for a much bigger introspection into the way Indian aviation is run by the government of India. I do hope they take that, and how our regulator is run, because let's not lose sight of the fact that if this could happen, and everywhere else where it has happened in other countries, we've always had a proper, hindsight investigation. People have looked at the errors and corrected the errors in the system. So that's what we need. Let's not beat IndiGo every day over it. IndiGo is done and dusted. They're back on track. They'll get their punishment. They'll probably get a lot of scrutiny and oversight after this. But we need to correct our own aviation system.
Of course, and IndiGo in its statement, I remember reading this because very clearly it had said that let not, the week's cancellation crisis define the journey that it has maintained for 19 years and the trust that it has, emboldened in the customers and the flyers of India. But speaking about introspection, as you mentioned, in hindsight, we also know that IndiGo operates about 2,300 aircrafts on a daily basis. And that overcapacity in some form or the other also made it tumble on ground, and cancellations as a cause happened. Why do you think that was allowed in the very first place?
Ma'am, poor oversight by the Director General of Civil Aviation, Directorate. It was plain and simple. It was poor oversight or, somebody with a wink and a nod allowed it. Let's be very, very clear on that. And that is when I talk of restructuring Indian aviation, you need to clean the house. It's not IndiGo's fault that they gamed the system. They did. Let's understand that. That's past. But if you're going to have the people who allowed it to happen continue in the post they happened when they knew IndiGo did not have the capacity to operate so many flights, then the government is aiding and abetting the people who allowed this to happen. I'm very strong in my words. I'm very blunt. There has to be a purge in the DGCA. There are too many people who have been involved in allowing this to happen, and the government must step in here. Whether it's the minister, the PMO, whoever has to, but there needs to be some corrective action here. You cannot have somebody who's taken their eye off the ball when the airline was letting go of pilots, when the airline was adding new aircraft, and when the airline stopped recruiting, still allowing them to add more flights. That means you didn't even have any kind of conditioning on what kind of standard force they required. And that's the failure here. IndiGo is an airline. Every airline would have tried to take advantage of the situation. The regulator has failed, in my opinion.
All right. Hi, Mr. Danish this side. So do you see that with the report of the committee that has been submitted, will IndiGo go on a course correction once we find out that what exactly went wrong?
Danish, your voice was muffled, but I understand that you're saying that after the report is made public, will IndiGo go on a course correction? Of course they will. There's no question about it. Danish, IndiGo already knows what's wrong. So does the DGCA people. But will the government go on a course correction is what I'm more interested in. IndiGo, of course, they're a publicly listed company. They are responsible to their shareholders. They're eminently, operationally, they've been fantastic in the last 19 years. Okay, this entire goof-up could happen again with another carrier, maybe who's not so big, and you might have another big issue like this. We've seen it in Southwest. We've seen it in American. We've seen it in Ryanair. It's happened all over the world. This is not the first country it's happening. But we need to make sure our regulators are up to scratch here. They're not scratching each other's back. That's the problem. I have very strong reservations about that. I have no problem. IndiGo will bring in more pilots. IndiGo will, make sure that flights are on time. They will compress their schedules and everything. But how will you stop and correct what's wrong with the regulations, the regulators? That's the important thing for us.
Right. Mr. Lazar, we've also been reporting about 3 new airlines getting their, 2 of them have gotten NOCs, and this includes Al Hind Air as well and Shrunk Air as well too. Now in view of this crisis, the timing is right, don't you think, for new airlines to try their luck? And because you're an aviation expert, I ask you this question. Looking at what happened with IndiGo, do you think these new airlines that are right now entering the picture will be under much tighter scrutiny or will have to tread a very careful path?
Malika, I was on your show, I think a day or 2 ago, discussing the new airlines. The NOC is only the first step. It's the first step of many steps. From NOC to AOP is a long journey. And, these guys are going to have to struggle very hard to get it. It's a welcome step. I wish there are more airlines that come forward. But I also believe, again, our government needs to make more airline-friendly policies to ensure that there is, greater accessibility to airlines. And airlines have, more breathing space. Currently, you've got IndiGo, you've got Air India. Both the owners have big, deep pockets. You've got Akasa also. You've got Spice, and you've got Star Air. These are the major airlines that are operating currently in the country. But when you look at the constraints against the aviators, the companies coming in, You have, ATF is 50%,
No, but
you have Q.
Mr. Lazar, I ask you this question because the magnitude of IndiGo's turmoil was hard to not notice. It in fact brought the entire airline industry to a standstill for just a couple of days, even if it was. But there were more than thousands of flights that were cancelled and many, many passengers that were stranded. Some of them also flew from abroad. People did not know where to go, and that was the dire need of that situation. I'd like to ask you, in view and taking lessons from this particular situation, do you think Indian aviation, the ecosystem of Indian aviation now needs to fight the monopoly sort of that IndiGo currently maintains as a pillar on top of it?
Absolutely, it does. Of course it does. And for that you need to restructure the Indian aviation ecosystem. It's a very warped, skewed ecosystem. And as we delve deeper, I hope there is a parliamentary committee that's looking into it. As they delve deeper, they will find out how this has been rotten from the core, actually, and not built for airline survival. So these guys can only compete with the IndiGos and the Air Indias provided they get a level playing field. So there's a lot of work that the airlines, that the ministry needs to do to ensure that new airlines are welcomed in and new airlines are allowed to breathe. That's what kills airlines. Like you mentioned at the last show, I remember 18 airlines have died in the last 15 or 20 years. I accept that. And for that, we need better conditions. You need some kind of relief for them. We've got Udan scheme and stuff like that. But there is a lot more that needs to be done. And of course, government must change policies to allow bigger competitors to take on the IndiGo. Otherwise, how will you ever break their monopoly if that's what we want to do? And that is, what would be the most likely thing given the current circumstances and the fiasco we've had. We look at China, 4 airlines, they've got 20, 23, 24% each. You look at the US, you've got, 5 big airlines and then, 80 other airlines. Nobody holds a stranglehold over the aviation system there. So that's what we need ideally in a country like India. 5, 6 big airlines and then maybe, 10 smaller airlines. But for that, you need a conducive atmosphere. If you do not have conducive, conditions where the owner of an airline doesn't even get 40% or 45% of his gross ticket fare in his pocket. Yeah, so that's what I feel.
Mr. Lazar, I would like to ask you that we are seeing such events happening in the middle of IndiGo's massive expansion plans. Over the past year, we saw that IndiGo placed 60 confirmed orders for its wide-body fleet as well. And so do you feel that whatever comes out in the findings of the report and the way we saw the operations, getting off track, do you feel that this will also impact IndiGo's negotiation skills with the lessors that are there? And we are seeing that the way the airline has been signing up a lot of agreements, interline agreements and other kind of agreements with other global carriers. So do you feel that this might impact the global image that IndiGo is really trying to make?
Lots of moving parts in your question. I'll try and answer them one by one. Number one, will it affect lessors? No, it won't. IndiGo, IndiGo is not affected. They're a giant in the leasing industry, sale and lease back and purchase, so they're big. They're going to stay big. The second thing is very important. IndiGo signing interline deals is great because it allows foreign airlines to bring in passengers and interline them on IndiGo. Also a great thing. Okay, that's not a problem. And it's going to continue. But what about the oversight of the regulator, which has been failing? If you've got a company or many companies bringing in aircraft one day after day, are you not keeping tabs on what their standard force should be? The DGCA car says 3 sets per aircraft. Is 3 sets per aircraft currently the correct kind of pilot strength you need to operate in an airline environment? No, average is 6 to 8 sets. So we are looking at it the wrong way. So therefore, you will always find understaffing at airlines that don't want to provide enough or that want to squeeze the maximum. And that's where the correction should come in the regulator. So that's my short point to the 3 questions that you raised.
Right.
Dani.
Thank you so much, Mr. Lazar, for accepting these questions with so much candor, and of course, when a breaking news scenario breaks in like this, and there's so many questions that we almost, like me and Danish, pointed at you. So thank you so much for taking them so well. And of course, your point being that IndiGo just took advantage of the leniency that it was thrown into. The main person perhaps to blame here is the regulator. And the report, as and when the details of this report come out, that has been submitted to the Ministry of Civil Aviation, we will know what exactly went wrong, maybe. But moving on,